This is Ed Rep Radio, presented by Eastman Music Company. This is Ed Rep Radio, a podcast to bring you ideas and information from industry experts you can use on the road every day. Presented by Eastman Music Company, and I'm your host, Shane Dool. Our guest today is someone who's been a friend and a mentor to me for many years now, Andy Wilson. Andy comes from decades of experience as a sales rep, leader of sales teams, and leader of sales leaders as vice president of sales for a large company outside of the music industry. Andy's now branching out into sales and leadership consulting and coaching. Over the years, some of the best presenters on sales and leadership that I've learned from have come from outside our industry. That's because there are so many universal truths that work for all sales professionals, regardless of the product or service you're selling. Andy and I are doing two separate episodes together for Ed Rep Radio. This episode is all about best practices for sales reps working with customers. The second episode that will be listed right next to this one in the podcast is geared towards sales leaders, managers, and owners. I hope you enjoy both. Andy Wilson, welcome to Ed Rep Radio. So glad you're here.
Thanks, Shane. Looking forward to our time together.
Yeah. You know, you and I have had so many great conversations over the years about the topic of sales, sales leadership, sales management, and it's usually huffing up a trail on a mountain bike or over a meal. So I'm looking forward to the world learning from you, because I've enjoyed learning from you myself, because it turns out we had very similar roles in very different industries, but so similar with sales and sales management. So,
well, certainly the feeling is mutual, Shane. It's always a two-way street, and always learn a ton from you, and always enjoy the conversation. So looking forward to this.
Yeah, me too. So why don't you tell everybody a bit about your background, where you came from, your experience, that kind of thing.
You know, I think I always like to start when I'm talking to salespeople that most of us actually never chose this role. We sort of fell into it. That's true for me as well. Actually studied to thinking I was going to go into the ministry originally, and ended up in sales and found it was really the right avenue for me, and in all the right ways have had a fantastic career. Like you, I started out just as a salesperson. I come from the commercial office furniture industry, which is an industry no one knows anything about, even though everybody utilizes our product every single day when they sit in their chair, they're sitting at their desk. And sold for about 18 years in the Boston market. So originally from New England, had an opportunity to get a promotion and move out to Colorado. I did that 8 years ago and was a regional sales director. We called them division managers, but the same idea, managing the Mountain Division. Did that for a number of years, then was promoted to vice president of the West, which is from Chicago all the way through California, so everything west of Chicago, for a number of years for a very large company. And then just recently, I got into sales consulting, or sales solution provider. So great career, loved it. Learned so much about sales execution, sales implementation, but I think more importantly about leadership as we move into management. So looking forward to talking about that as well.
Yeah, you've really evolved through your career, haven't you? From boots on the ground, working with businesses, selling your products, all the way up through managing pretty large sales teams.
Yep, managing a big territory, Boston, Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Rhode Island, as a sort of a feet in the street rep. Like a number of like what you do, selling through distribution, which is a different model compared to some sales. And then managing the mountain region, which is a pretty significant size region geographically, but population-wise pretty small. Team of about 8 sales reps there, and then now in my most previous role, I had 4 regional sales directors reported to me and about 50 sales reps, give or take 5.
Okay. So when we were discussing having you on the podcast here, we realized that there are really 2 episodes that need to be recorded. One is the best practices for being a sales rep. The person who's out there selling the goods, selling the services. Then a whole different episode for sales leadership and sales management, because you're really talking to you. It's very clear that they're 2 different topics. So if you're listening to this one now about being a great sales rep and best practices, make sure if leadership is something you're interested in, maybe you are currently a sales leader, make sure you listen to the other episode with Andy, because it's going to be full of really great wisdom on that topic. So, Andy, now we're talking to a group of musicians, and I know music is something that's really interesting to you, right, and close to you. What was your background in music? Yeah,
I
we
didn't
can't
mention
let that
that.
go.
Yeah. Right, right. Well, yeah, I like to preface this. I was a drummer, and when they introduced the band, I grew up playing in rock bands as from grade school through middle school to high school, all with the same guys. They always introduced a band by saying, "Let me introduce you to the musicians of the band and the drummer." I was with some really talented guys, 2 of which went to Berkeley, 2 of which still play an awful lot today. My brother was a
Yeah.
guitar player, so I just grew up playing in bands and loved the drums for sure, and stay very up to speed on current drummers and all that. Don't really play anymore because that's just what happens when you aren't playing in a
Mm,
band. It's hard to have a drum set in the house to take up that
yeah.
space
Well,
and
I've seen you
noise.
play some mean air drums in
Yep,
the car, so you still got it.
I
Yep.
can play the
Yep.
mean air drum for sure.
So I'd like
Right.
to dig into some of your wisdom on being a really
Yeah.
great sales professional and some of the lessons you've learned through your long career in being a salesperson. And you had sent me a really interesting PowerPoint that you would walk through with your sales team, and I'd kind of like to use that as a framework for our discussion because it's really good. And it all starts with the word attitude.
Yeah. I think the best way to frame sales, and I think that so many of us have an idea of what sales is that it's out there forcing someone to be interested in something
Hmm.
they're not really interested in. And actually, sales is simply just helping someone.
Hmm.
That's all it is. And I think that for most people, and I would imagine probably you probably have a large set of people in your industry that never anticipated getting into sales. They were probably musicians thinking they're going to be playing their instrument, and now they're in sales. And there's probably some queasiness to
Hmm.
this idea in their
Hmm.
brain, maybe of sales. And sales is really just about helping someone. That's all it is. When you're truly someone that provides value and help, it totally does make it a great experience for everybody involved. No doubt about it. But that all starts with attitude. And if your attitude is one of a servant, of helping others, of building relationships with people that make a difference and matter, that's really what sales is all about. Just
Mm,
simply providing help. And that's really the key is that mindset of attitude of, yeah, how can I help someone today? As opposed to how can I go
mm,
sell something today? Those are two very, very different things. When you go with the attitude of help, looking for positive interactions with people and building relationships, that changes the whole game, quite frankly. So I do think that's where it all starts. It's always about that. I'll tell a little story here because I just to sort of give an example of this. And when I recently left my last position as vice president of sales, the responses I received from people were not quite what I
hmm.
was anticipating. Honestly, it was you're expecting, "Hey, so appreciated you that you helped me hit quota," or, "I learned X from you and it helped me be a better salesperson." Every comment I got was about something personal. It was about a relationship that I had with the people on my team. It was about, "Hey, I appreciate it when you listened to me here," or, "I really valued when you gave me this insight about my family there," or, "When you gave me some advice." It was all had nothing to
Interesting.
do with work. And I think that's, quite frankly, sort of what we're trying to get to in sales is having those kind of connections with people where we're actually providing more than simply a resource in a way that can help with something they immediately need, but a connection that is
Mm,
deeper than that
at a
and
real human
matters.
level.
I think that's
Yeah.
human level. It's always about relationships and humanity. It always is. When you remove your humanity from an interaction, you're becoming a salesperson as opposed to someone
Mm,
that's looking to
mm,
help. So I think that's where it all starts. And that starts with having the right attitude and having that mindset shift that you're in service to help others. And there's certainly some tactical things that need to be done along the way. That's always part of the process. And we'll
mm,
get to some of that, but it starts there. It always starts there. And I always like to frame it like that because I think it changes the mindset for most when they think
mm.
about it in that way.
There is
Yeah.
certainly, I'm sure this is just across the board with anybody, but there is certainly a feeling in the education world, in the music world, that looks at sales very negatively, that name
Right.
salesperson. So I love the way that you frame it, because it takes all of that negativity completely away from it.
And it should, because if we're actually doing the job right, that's
Mm,
actually what we're doing. We're actually helping someone find a solution to solve a problem that they have, whether to be buy the right instrument, whether that to buy the right office furniture, which is what I did, or the right software program. We're all really solving a problem that needs to be met. That's why when someone's
Mm-hmm.
looking to buy
Mm-hmm.
something, you
Yeah.
know? So it is a good way to look at it. And I think we need to move on sort of this to the next little portion here, the cornerstones that I think are that
Mm-hmm.
this is sort of built on are really sort of three simple things. And if I take a step back here, the stuff I'm going to be talking about are much more soft skills than hard tactical selling skills. Because I think unless you have the soft skills right, the tactical stuff
Hmm.
is irrelevant, quite frankly. You can have the best tactics in the world, but if you're not approaching it from the way I described with the right attitude, and these cornerstones I'm going to talk about here are really sort of three things. And these might be a little bit unique to my industry. It might be a little bit different for you, but it's about being responsive, trustworthy, and reliable. Those are sort of the cornerstones that I find that sales needs to be built on. And that really comes down to this idea of helping others. I'm responsive, I'm trustworthy, and I'm
Hmm.
a reliable person. When people know that you approach them and your work in that way, they will want to work with you,
Mm-hmm.
right? You will be easy to choose over others in the marketplace because you have these sort of bedrocks of how you approach things that you've built because you actually are responsive. You've shown trustworthiness and
Hmm.
you're a reliable person.
Can you break down
Um,
each one of those words for a moment and give it kind of an
yeah,
example of what it means to be responsive or not responsive?
right, right. I think it's going to be a little bit different for every industry. I think the speed of what expectations are
Hmm.
have only increased in our world exponentially. We have text, we have Teams or some kind of chat within our computers. We have phone calls. I mean, when you and I started sales, or certainly when I started sales, not probably not you. I literally had to pull over and use a payphone to make a phone call. I didn't have a cell phone, right? So the response time then would not suffice for what the
Hmm.
expectation is today. But I think that when people ask a question or need something, your responsiveness and ability to respond to them needs to be appropriate
Hmm.
to what their expectations are. When I was a rep representing a manufacturer, I always heard within my distribution partners, "Hey, you get back to me so quickly. I really appreciate that. It's
Huh.
amazing how many people don't." And I'm always thinking to myself, isn't that sort of the first thing of the job is to respond to your customer? Like that, isn't that sort of the highest priority? I can't believe that people weren't responding, and that's why were calling me. But it's probably likely true
Mm-hmm.
in your world as
Universal
well.
truth.
When
Yeah.
people call, universal truth. So responsiveness needs to be whatever that expectation is, whatever that customer's expectation is, not what
Hmm.
your expectation is. They expect a response within 2 hours because that's the window they're available at school and they're done for the day and they turn off their phone and don't use their computer, then you better respond within 2 hours. If it's the kind of person that says, "Hey, get back to me tomorrow," then that's appropriate. But I think just responsiveness needs to be dictated by the
Hmm.
customer
Hmm. Great point.
always. Trustworthiness is your ability to keep your word at all times and live with integrity. I think that's probably the sour thought people have about sales in their mind is that lack of integrity. That someone's trying to take advantage of me when they sell, and our trustworthiness needs to be rock solid so that can
Hmm.
never be questioned. That, hey, even if my competitor has the right solution, I will recommend it.
Hmm.
That's the type of salesperson I was because if you're truly trying to help someone, you're actually trying to help them find the right solution, even if it's you don't provide it. And when you build that kind of trust with the customer, they will call you over anybody else because you actually will give them
Hmm.
sound wisdom
Great point.
for
Great
what they
point. Yeah.
need. I've always said this: even when you recommend something that you don't provide, it will be returned
Hmm.
tenfold because of the trust you're able to build. Because that's a truth you live by as part of your core, which I think is really really important. And then reliability sort of goes hand in hand with the first two. If you're responsive and trustworthy, you're going to be reliable. Reliable means you say what you're going to do, you get things done that are requested, it's done within the time expectations that are clearly spelled out. But I think it's something everybody struggles with is being really reliable. We're all asked to do a lot. We're all wearing a lot of hats, and a lot of that has to do with establishing consistency to how you do things, and also making sure you're keeping priorities
Hmm.
top of mind. Most salespeople can be busy all the time, so it's about prioritization is where you really find reliability. if your prioritization is out of whack, then it's going to be hard to be reliable in the important areas that really
Makes
matter.
sense. Yeah, makes sense. Busy
Yep.
isn't always productive either, is it? Yeah.
100%. I've said this about my team. My sales team is the type of team that literally could sit at their computer all day and never not be busy, but they're simply responding to things instead of being proactive,
Hmm.
doing things. And sales is about being proactive. You certainly need to respond to things, that's for sure. But if you're allowing others to dictate what you're going to do, you'll never get to the proactive things that actually will really make a difference in your success.
Yeah, makes sense. What else?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what I touch on is a number of things. I think the first one is called being present. Being present means you have to be face
Hmm.
to face with customers. I think we've lost a sense of that with COVID. Teams became pretty convenient, or Zoom, or whatever application you're using, but relationships aren't built over a computer. They're just not. So being present in marketplace, face to face with people, where you can really build relationships with folks that are decision makers who can impact your business, is really what it's all about. So I think the first priority is being present and having a real cadence to what you do, and having consistency to your engagement with your customer base, and having a prioritization of where that needs to sit. You can't see everybody all the time. I sort of think the 80-20 rule is a dictum of life. It certainly is in sales, and really having a good sense of that. So where you're spending your time with the most important people, and the consistency which you do that, is where the
Can
difference is
you,
made.
if someone hasn't heard of that
Um,
rule before, the 80-20 rule, can you kind of,
yeah,
there's another name for that, right? The Pareto principle? Yeah.
yes, the Pareto
What's that all
Pareto
about?
principle. You bet. It's a fascinating principle, actually, because it crosses into all kinds of things, whether it be population or even
Hmm.
tree growth in forests. It's this idea that 80% of something is done by the 20%. And if you look at sales, it's really a very pretty accurate truism across most sales organizations, where they get 80% of their business
Hmm.
from 20% of their customers, of their dealers, of their people that sell their stuff, or buy their stuff. So it's a really pretty consistent principle. It might give or take 10%, but I think it's a great way to look at business. Is, hey, where am I getting 80% of my business from? And that's where I need
Yeah.
to spend my
Yeah.
time. It could be with one customer. If that's the case, then you might want to expand, because you're in
All
jeopardy
right.
of being in big
It's
trouble if
scary.
you lose that
Yeah.
one customer, right? So I think a balanced approach for that eighty
Hmm.
20 is an important one to always be looking at. And I think that can dictate where you spend your time, and where you're being present and building those relationships. So that's a core concept that certainly lived
Hmm.
true in our industry, and one that we built most of our sales strategy model around. It was 80-20 rule. It was highly consistent in every single territory,
Hmm.
believe it or not. But I would encourage the folks listening here to think about that, and do some analysis of their market, and, hey, where does their business come from? Does it come from 3 schools or 3 school systems? If that's the case, that's where you probably want to spend most of your time. And then what I always looked at was, how do I build bench
Hmm.
strength? In other words, who's next up? Who are the next 2 other schools or school systems or customers that I need to focus on to try to develop, that I can add to this sort of 80-20, to diversify my portfolio and diversify where
Hmm.
I'm getting my
Hmm.
business from. Um,
Something interesting, the ad reps out there, they're probably listening in a van right now, driving to the next school where they will be
right.
present, where they will be physically present.
Yep.
And something I liked about your PowerPoint you sent over, 2 words that I'd like to dig into for a second: intentional interactions.
Yes. Yeah. That's a very word we emphasize very strongly. And I'm glad you brought that up, Shane. That's awesome. I think it's really easy for salespeople to show up
Hmm.
without purpose. And it could be that you're maybe do a milk run, which is something people hate to hear, but I think there's value in having consistency. But the idea of a milk run is that, hey, you show up at the same place all the time. They expect to see you. But what I find with a milk run is that it's done
Hmm.
without real intention. And I think that every single sales call should have an actionable thing you're trying to accomplish. So it could be, and these don't need to be big lists. This doesn't need to be, I'm going to get a commitment from Steve today to buy 7,000 flutes, right? It could be simple as, I'm going to show X to him or her, or I'm going to demo X, or I'm going to bring up this feature that might not know about. And I think it needs to be very, very
Hmm.
intentional. It could be one specific thing. It could be 3 things you needed to cover. But as I always told my team, it would take 7 to 10 times for anybody to remember anything. So consistency in that intention is important, and recognize you probably need to repeat stuff numerous
Mm,
times for it to stick, because that's
sure.
just how the brain works. But we were always very, very specific about intentional interactions. What is the purpose of this call? What are you trying to accomplish? What value are you adding and providing? If you don't add value, you're
Hmm.
easy to ignore. You always need to bring and provide value. Showing up and saying, "Hey, how's it going? Anything you think you're working on that would be helpful, that would be good for me to know about," is like blah.
Mm,
That's salesy. Now you turn into a salesperson. When you go in with intention, saying, "Huh, I'm meeting with this person. Last time we met, they said these 3 things. I'm gonna come and actually address these 3 things today, or one of the 3 things, and let them know the other 2 things are still, working on it. I'll get back to him on," whatever that might be, but it needs to be really intentional. That's actually just how you provide value, and also sort of hit those 3 cornerstones. You're building responsiveness, you're trustworthy, and you're being,
yeah.
reliable when you
I
come
can imagine
with
too, if
intention.
you go into a meeting or even if it's just a quick drop by the school, if you don't have a purpose to be there, it's probably feeling like a waste of time to that customer, to that teacher.
That's right.
Nobody likes that.
N No doubt. That's a complaint that people will say about
Wasting their
salespeople
time.
if you don't
Mm,
come with intention. Yep. So I think I would encourage the folks listening here, give some real thought to how you can approach every single sales call with real intention. It doesn't take a lot. You guys have so much to offer, I'm sure. So many services, all the different products that you offer. I'm sure you have some unique things that are unique to that's just sort of what you
mhm.
provide competitively. You always want to come with something specifically that will be of value to them, not something for you,
Right, right.
but for them.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think it's a real
always
challenge
the key.
sometimes for the ed reps out there because sometimes they'll have 70 schools they visit every week. And to come up with 70
Right.
intentional interactions, I think can be daunting to some listening, but it could very well be the same intention for 70 visits. Because everybody's different. Every
Exactly
teacher,
right.
every customer is different. To them, it's fresh and new. Even if you've done it the
Right.
65th time, maybe it's a new mouthpiece or something you're bringing around in the van. But at least you had a reason to be there. At least you
Yeah.
had an intention for that trip.
Exactly right, and I think you're probably right. What I would encourage is, what are those common things that might be, of value to all that you can always bring? I think that'd be a good thing to sort of get your brain around and maybe have a list of. So if there isn't something specifically that needs to be addressed with any one individual, you at least have these go-tos of, "Hey, last time I did show that new mouthpiece, but I didn't show him the metronome. I'm gonna go in here and I'm gonna specifically talk about the
Mm,
metronome."
yeah.
Right?
It's
So I think it requires that, and I mean, it takes, intention and wisdom to understand what the right thing is.
yeah.
It is, and if you have 70 schools you're gonna call on in a week, I guess my first thing is understand the
Mhm, right.
80/20 rule.
Maybe it shouldn't be 70?
Like, right, maybe 70 is not the right way to spend your time. Maybe there's only 30 that really matter, and there's 10 more that are on the build
Mm,
my bench strength list, and the rest are every 3
mhm,
weeks, you know? I don't have the right answer to that because I don't know your guys' business intimately, but I think giving real intention to that, we all know that it's easier to gain business from those that are already fans and people that give us business than it is to get brand new business from someone who's not a fan
mm.
and doesn't give you business. We need to do both, but, going where the low-hanging fruit sits is always the best approach, and is, quite frankly, a way to keep
Mm,
yourself
mm.
motivated as
Yeah,
well.
all good points. So the next slide you have in your presentation is something we talk about quite a bit here on EdRep Radio, and that is relationships.
All sales really hinges on relationships, hence the cornerstones, reliable, trustworthiness, being responsive. That's really how you build relationships, is by proving those points
Mm,
consistently with someone. The industry I came from, it was the kind of industry that would be a lot of influencers. You'd be doing a lot of things, evening events. You'd have a lot of cocktail hours or special events for architects and interior designers. So there'd be a lot of social activity around what we did that provided great opportunities outside of work to
mhm.
gain relationships. So I can't speak specifically to how this
It's not
group
too
works,
far
but
off.
okay, got it. So any way you can find to connect with others to build relationships is the most important thing. And I think more importantly, it needs to be personal and it needs to have some humanity to it. It can't be just all about business or all about, instruments. There's going to be some commonality there, which is a shared interest, which makes it easy to talk about things. But getting to know people's family, getting to know the things people enjoy. So when you're engaged with them, there's a personal connection there. Hey, how was the weekend with your family? I heard you guys did X. Let's talk about that. It just, I think, changes the whole dynamic when you have true relationships with people, because people buy from people. It's always the case. So, just a couple of things around that is you always practice the golden rule. I think in sales, again, back to serving others and helping, what's really of their best interests at heart, and you always want to keep that top of mind. You need to constantly look at building and earning trust. This idea of going above and beyond is really, really important. Something I always told my team: when you build a relationship with someone and they need you to do something, even if it's not in your sort of role to do, when you do that for them, that's the kind of thing that communicates value and builds trust way beyond just doing your job. So that's an important one. I think another one that I've always told my team is assume the
What do you
best
mean?
in others. We never know, what's in someone's mind, what burdens they might be carrying, what challenge they might have that day, and maybe we're going to meet with them and it was not a good interaction. Hey, what's their problem? And I think we always want to assume the best in others, unless we're proven wrong time and time again.
Yeah,
Then we want to
right.
move
Good
on,
point.
right? Yeah. Sometimes we need to fire customers.
Mm,
Truly, I mean, it's the truth. But I think that's a good thing to always remind ourselves, because especially in the education world, they're dealing with a lot, and they may have come out of a difficult parent meeting or something, and are hot and not in the right place, and then all of a sudden you're in there, and the interaction didn't go as anticipated. We always want to assume the best in others, unless it's proven wrong. And then the last point on this thing about building relationships is don't take it personally. You're not going to win every time. They may not seem interested every time, and you need to never take that personally. You just need to chalk it up to just one of those days, and tomorrow's a new day. Those are sort of the cornerstones of building trust. Practice the golden rule, build and earn, or build relationships. I meant is practice the golden rule, build and earn trust, go above and beyond, assume the best in others, and don't take it personally.
Yeah, all good stuff.
Yeah.
We talk about building relationships a lot on this podcast. So
Yeah.
what's a way to maybe accidentally, inadvertently destroy trust, hurt a relationship?
Oh boy. I think it's easy. I think if you, don't do what you say you're going to do, that erodes trust really, really quickly. I think if you say things about competitors negatively, that erodes trust. I think we never want to speak ill of a competitor. In my world, there was certainly some very, very large dominant competitors that do great things, that make great stuff, right? The same thing is true in the music industry for sure. So I think that's one that never goes over well, is to speak negatively about a competitor. We want to speak positively about what we do, not negatively
Yeah, good point.
about someone else. But I think it's like anything we all experience. If people don't keep their word or say something and they don't do it, those are the kind of things that erode trust. So I think that it's about integrity. It's super important in sales. If there's any sniff of a lack of integrity, that erodes your relationship and the trust that you've really worked so hard to establish.
Yeah, good things to remember.
Yep.
It just once, right? Just one little thing can just destroy
One
it
little
all.
thing. Yep. I guess one other point around that too, Shane, is I think it's if something does come up, I think it's really important to address it immediately. And I say that because sometimes things are misconstrued or misunderstood, and it's actually not the issue that maybe someone thought it was. If it is, I still think you need to address it and say, "Gosh, I really blew it there. That was a mistake I made, and not getting back to you here. We've been working together for a long time, and I'm consistent here. I missed this somehow. I'm going to get back to you." And so I think you need to make it right and address it. That builds trust by addressing when things are a little bit wrong or something went wrong. When you don't do it, then trust continues to erode, quite frankly.
Yeah, totally agree.
Again, that's a relation. When you have a relationship with people, you talk to them when things come up.
Right. A good, healthy relationship, you
Right?
do. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I always think measure of a good business or a good relationship is not as much as when things are going right, but what do they do when things go wrong? It really
100%.
shows their true
Yep.
color.
Right. We all experienced that during COVID when
Oh
supply
yeah.
chain was a disaster. I know you did
Yep.
as well as I did, when we couldn't deliver things as expected, and no one could. So it wasn't unique to your brand or mine, but it certainly made some very, very challenging conversations with customers, and that's where
Mhm.
trust was put in
Yeah,
the
really
line.
tested.
And the
Yeah.
relationship was
Yeah.
really tested,
Yeah.
no
Huh.
doubt.
I'm
Yep.
glad that's over. Well, the need to build relationships isn't over, but I'm glad the supply chain craziness is over. Yeah. Don't
Oh
miss
my
out.
gosh, no doubt. Right.
Next on your slide, be a resource. What do you
Yeah,
mean by that?
be a resource. Yeah, I mean, we're the pros, right? You're the pros of the products that you sell, of the and that's what quite frankly is totally expected of us, that we know our stuff and that we're an expert. It's remarkable how many salespeople actually are not experts and don't spend the time and investment to
Hmm.
continually keep up in their trade on the things they need to know and the knowledge that's required for them to excel and be known as an expert. I think that takes effort. It takes intention to be a resource like that. And I think you need to make sure you bring value to your trusted partners through that resource. I already mentioned this, being responsive and being overly so. You take every opportunity to educate others about the products and resources you offer. What I always thought about is we want to be a great resource with the information we have, but the best way we can be a salesperson is actually have that great knowledge be inculcated into our
Hmm.
customers. In other words, we've sort of educated them to the point where they know as
Wow.
much as we do, right? And when you can get to that point with a customer, you are
Huh.
done selling anything
When they
with
can
them,
teach
quite
you about your
frankly,
product and others.
You bet.
Huh.
Yes. Yep. So I think that's the resource thing, and these things are, we're sort of tripping into a number of
Mhm.
things that are sort of look like the replication of what we already talked about,
Mm.
because these all go together. These aren't just a string you can pull. This is a total collective
Yeah.
that makes
Yeah.
all the
I want to go.
difference.
There's something that's just
Um,
going off in my mind right now about how to apply what we were just talking about to an ed rep's life, about your customer being able to
right.
teach others about your product. I think if you're an ed rep listening, ask yourself, could band and orchestra teachers explain your rental contract to you? Do they know it? Do they know
I
it?
love
Could they
that.
go to a parent and
Right.
explain it to a parent? Could they explain your trade policy? And I think back
Mhm.
to when I was an ed rep, the answer probably was no. They knew some of the basics, but I don't think they could explain it as well as I did. I think that's a really interesting point, Andy.
Right. Yeah, you get that kind of fan and build that kind of relationship, you all of a sudden are not working really hard to sell stuff
Yeah.
with that
Yeah.
person,
Makes sense. I
right?
like that.
So be a resource, and that could mean all kinds of things to this crew listening here. But being a resource can mean all kinds of different things to different individuals. But always look to be a resource
Mm.
everywhere where you can.
Yeah. That's good.
Yep. And then the next one is be the product expert. I sort of touched on that a little bit about being a resource, because that sort of goes hand in hand with that. But really knowing your stuff and knowing your product is an absolute expectation. I'm always caught off guard by how few invest the time needed to truly make sure they
Mm.
are the expert in a certain area. Maybe you're an expert on, brass instruments and not so much on X. How to become an expert on
Mm.
everything you sell. I think that's really, really important. And if there's, tap into resources, tap into your team members, tap into those that can really help you become the expert you need to be, because it is an expectation for your customer that you are the
Yeah.
expert with what you're
Yeah.
selling. But it's just shocking how many people
I
aren't,
mean,
quite
you think
frankly.
about when you go to any
Yeah.
store or business, how often are you actually wowed by the person
Right.
you're working with? How often are you like, wow, they really know this product, or they really know the ins and out of the service or this industry? It's few and far between, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I would even go one step further, and that is knowing your competitors'
Hmm.
products as well, right? Because that's certainly important to you if you're trying to be able to speak, really committedly to the distinctions that of the products that you offer, if there are any. Sometimes there aren't, but having that understanding just elevates your game with the client. And again, we never want to speak negatively about a competitor, but we certainly can speak to the distinctions and differences because those are value propositions that
Yeah,
are
yeah.
important to know.
So I'm sure it's
Yep.
slightly different between industries, but what's a good way to ensure that you are actually learning, you are actually becoming an expert on the product and service that you are providing and selling? A lot of times, even from the company that someone works for, it's not provided.
Right.
So,
Yeah,
what do you have
exactly.
to say about that? Like, how do you become an expert?
Well, I came from a big company where we had all
Mm,
online training and every kind of training module available for anything new we came out with or any product. You know, I don't know enough about the music industry to speak specifically to this. What I would always tell my team is you have to actually go to installations of office furniture. If you truly want to know how this stuff really works, you have to go to installation and actually start putting stuff together with the
mm,
installers, right? So I don't know what that similarity might be for the music industry. It's one thing to see a product in in a brochure. It's another thing to see an installer installing it
mm,
and, "Oh, well, I didn't quite know how
mm,
it went together
mm,
quite like that." And you learn some things that you can really help educate a customer on when, "Hey, you don't really need this." I was out in an install last week and they didn't need these extra things. This will save you some money. It's going up against a wall anyway, so then you're never going to see this component that's not part of it, right? So that's how our knowledge would come from training modules and then from experience with the product
mm.
and
In
market,
the trenches with the product.
um, in the trenches with the
Mm.
product, right? I don't know what's similar to that within
Yeah, I
your
think a couple
industry,
examples would
you
be,
know?
if you're out in a band room, see just how well those instruments that you provided are working. Ask the teacher how
There
well
you go. Yep.
are the students being successful with them? Is that mouthpiece that we sold the
Yes.
student, uh, you know, improving their intonation? Are they having an easier time playing? Or if an
I love
industry
it.
rep comes by, pick their brain about what
Right.
they've seen in the field, what works and what doesn't. Yeah.
And I'm sure that the manufacturers that all these folks represent also probably provide some training and some insight and some expertise, for sure. So I think it's, tapping into it. Like, hey, where's my weak spot from a product knowledge standpoint, and how
Mm,
do I make that
mm.
better?
Yeah. Of
Yep.
course, podcasts, right?
There you go. Podcasts. You bet. The next one is we sort of touched on a number of these things throughout this, but it's
Mm,
called knowing your market, and we sort of touched on this in the 80/20 rule. Really understand where your business comes from, where you're spending your time, energy, and effort. Is it in the right places based on what you know about the marketplace and where your business comes from? In some instances, that knowledge is going to be scary. My gosh, my business comes from here. I don't have enough there. I got to go find more. But it's sort of like opening the credit card
mm,
bill. If you don't do that, you can't
mhm,
ignore it. The bill is going to be due. So I think it's really just about knowing your marketplace, understanding where your business comes from, where your support is, and really giving that sort of 80/20 rule look to understanding your marketplace and where your time is spent. I think that most salespeople struggle with spending the right
mm,
time in the right places. It's easy to be pulled by an opportunity, a need or demand, as opposed to a necessity that's actually going to drive success in sales. And that's done from being really specific about where you're
mm,
spending your time and energy. And you only can do that by really understanding your market and where your business is coming from. I don't know what kind of reporting tools, you know, these folks have. I came from a big company where reporting was insane and overwhelming. And quite frankly, that was a problem because there's so much it's hard to sort of see through the forest through the trees. But I think broadly speaking, I would say that every rep in the territory probably knows where
mm.
their business
Yeah,
comes
yeah.
from and whether or not that's a limiting challenge, whether or not that's a
Yeah,
good
I
thing.
think in this arena, the most important numbers to know are the number of rental contracts you get from any given teacher or any given school.
There you go.
If you know nothing else, that's the number to know. Then you really know because that's
Right.
that's the bread and butter for a music store. So to understand
Yeah,
which
totally.
customers are providing all those rentals, super important.
Yeah. Yep. So that's a good one. And then the sort of the correlation to this one is, does the market know
Hmm.
you? So the next sort of cornerstone of this is you need to know your market, but then does the market really know you? And that's, are you connected with all the school system, appropriate school system people? Do all the education music teachers understand who you are and what you do and all that you provide and can do for them? Are there other influencers that you need to be connected with and know and have knowledge so they have knowledge of who you are? So again,
Yeah,
it's
that's
about
what I was thinking.
relationships,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. It's one thing to know your marketplace. It's another thing if the market really knows you, right? That's sort of the next step in iteration of your success is the whole market knows that I'm the guy to go to or gal to go to just to rent musical instruments from. I am the guy.
Yeah.
I am the girl.
Yeah. Sounds like
you
word of
know,
mouth would be really
and
important for the market to know you. Maybe you
right,
didn't actually meet every
you
single
bet.
customer, but if you're known through word of mouth and people suggesting that they do business with you,
Right,
I think it's probably a good sign, right? That the market knows you.
it is no doubt. I mean, that's super important. From industry I came from, when we worked with architect firms, design firms, construction industry, commercial real estate, it was important that we were known within those groups of people to help influence the consideration that we'd be part of the furniture package or part of the
Mm.
furniture solution. So for us, it wasn't just selling to people who sold our stuff. It was also working with that influencer set to be known. Hey, you need furniture client that's moving into the space I just leased you. Hey, call Andy. He's the guy you
Yeah.
want to deal
Yeah.
with furniture.
In our world, that would be
So
the influencers would be band and orchestra teachers, obviously, private
right.
teachers, um,
Hmm.
community orchestras, community bands, community private lessons studios. Like if it's something like that, we focus so much on band and
Right.
orchestra teachers. Sometimes we forget there are other influencers out there, um, college professors.
Yeah. And I think a good action would be for anyone listening to write down who are the influencers within your marketplace, within the groups that Shane mentioned, and hey, where am I at with them? Do they know who I am? They have the ability to really probably change your business if you were to make some inroads in the
Mm.
groups Shane just mentioned there. You know, and that's what we were always trying to do is be known in the marketplace within this influencer set because that can make all the difference in your ability to be successful or not. Yeah, I think that broadly speaking, sales is about sort of expanding your network to people that can help you can help impact your ability to be
Mm.
helpful,
Yeah.
right? Um, the, of course, we want people to be able to buy our stuff, so we're making money and hitting quota and doing the things that we need to do to keep our livelihood flourishing and our family happy. But there's a broad set of people that can impact that, and the more of those people you're connected with, the easier your
Hmm.
lift
Hmm.
becomes. It's sort of like building your team of
Yeah, I like
supporters.
that. The nice thing is the
Yeah,
music industry
it's a
is
good way to
so
think about it.
tight. Musicians all know each other. Teachers
Right.
all know each other. It's not too hard to build that network.
Hmm. And I don't know if this last, I think this might be close to the last one here. The last one is,
Mm.
ask for the business. And at the end of the day, there's a lot of different ways to do that. I don't think we want to say, "Hey, sign here," or, I don't know your guys' particular industry well enough to know what that sort of looks like. But at the end of the day, we're doing all this work to help people to try to win business and to
Mhm.
have sales success. And I do think it's important that we have confidence that we provide a great service, we provide fantastic products. We're a great company to work with. I'm a great rep to work with. We should have every right when we've built trust in relationships to
Mm.
ask people for business. It's what they're quite frankly expecting from us. I don't know enough about your industry to know, um, but some way to ask appropriately for business needs to be inculcated in every sort of
Mm.
engagement. It could be that it might be asking for the next meeting or asking for a next step. There's all different ways to ask for business without sort of saying sign here. But I would ask the crew to think about what might that look like for them to frame things in a way that helps move business forward, where they're helping to win because that's what we're doing. We're all this help and all this relationship and service is really to help us win, and we have every right to
Right,
because we're
right. You earned it.
helping.
Yeah, you're helping them.
Right?
Yeah, I'm glad we're
Yep,
talking
we
about
earned it.
this because it's
And I think,
actually something
yeah,
I find through observation in the music world. A lot of people, like I mentioned, they don't like the feeling of being a salesperson. They don't like the
right,
negative connotation of being a salesperson. And sometimes to them, one of the most salesy things to do is to ask for the sale, to
right.
get to that
Yep,
point where they're asking for money. But it's so important, isn't it? Like I've seen myself included as an ed rep, forgetting to ask, would you like to actually go through with this transaction? Would you like to purchase these tubas? Would you
Right.
like to set up that evening for the parents to come to rent instruments from our store?" And then wonder why you didn't get the business.
Right. It's interesting you say that because in my industry, we often hire interior designers that got a degree in interior design and never planned on being in
Hmm.
sales, but found out that they actually are sitting around a computer all the time. They have great people skills and they end up in sales. But that's something we have to teach them because they find it salesy to
Mhm.
ask for the business as well. But I think this is why the cornerstones that I've talked about are so important. When you've built relationships, when you've built trust, when you've established um, a real consistency how to do things with people, you have every right to ask for the business because you've built those things appropriately, and that's the next sort of step in the process
Mm.
is to ask for business. You know, and we should have confidence in that we're providing something that's actually going to help them and help their students, and that's a good thing. So it's not something that's a negative. It's exactly what the intent of all this
Right,
engagement is
right.
all about. But if you don't do it, sometimes it doesn't happen, and if a competitor does, you could be losing the
Mhm.
business, quite
Yeah,
frankly,
it's true.
right? Yeah. So be confident, ask for the business, you provide a great service, and you've done all the hard work of getting to the place of, this being a natural thing
Mm.
to ask.
Yeah, I love it.
Yep. And then my last sort of, thing here is I have sort of these core cornerstones that I've always sort of preached to my team, all the time. There's sort of mantras that I repeat, I include in my emails, so they're real familiar with this stuff. And they're real simple. It's consistency over intensity. It's better to be consistent than
Hmm.
intense for short period of times, especially in sales. It's the long game, especially in the sales that you all are doing and the sales that I came from. It's about being really, really consistent all the time. That's how you build trust. That's how you build relationships. When you're seen consistently, you're going to gain more business. Some people go in spurts of intensity, and then they drop
Mm.
off the face of the earth, and then they go on another spurt of intensity, and then they
Mm.
drop off the face of the earth. That's not how you build the cornerstones
Yeah.
as I've
I
outlined
wanna
them.
pause there for a second just to make a
Or
connection
yeah,
'cause, sometimes there are ed reps out there who are very, very consistent. They're every single week.
right,
They're very intentional. They're extremely helpful. They have great relationships, and they're always there, and they get great business. But there are some who don't run a schedule. They're there once in a while, and maybe
hmm
they're only there if they're running a sale at the store or there's a promotion or it's, back to
right,
school season. They wanna go get rentals, but they disappear the rest of the year. Uh, and what you say, it feels very true. Those who really do well are
yeah.
the ones who are there all the time.
It's always about consistency in sales. It is, and I think that's true for even if you're selling something direct that's a one-off sale because the consistency there might be I got to make 22 cold
Mm.
calls every day. You're right, but I better be consistent with that if I want results. So that's going to be different for everything, but the more consistent you can be in how you approach your work and what you do, that matters. Um, the second one is
Hmm,
fundamentals over fads.
interesting.
And that's this idea that it's easy to get caught in traps in sales or, hey, here's a new idea, and here's another new idea, and here's another new idea, as opposed to sticking to the fundamentals that we
Mm,
know work. That goes back to
yeah.
consistency, quite frankly. So it's sort of the blocking and tackling of the things that need to be done and the ed space here that makes a difference in doing that stuff all the time
Mm,
consistently. I think that's important. So fundamentals over fads. The next one is process over outcome.
that's interesting. What do you mean by that?
And what I mean by that is that I think in sales, it's easy to get caught looking at
The
the
numbers?
outcome,
Hmm,
the numbers, how I'm doing, and actually the outcomes are the echoes of actions taken.
huh.
They always
Outcomes
are.
are the echoes of actions
Are the
taken.
echoes of
That's
actions
great. I'm gonna
taken.
put that on my wall.
Yeah. Yep. So that's another mantra that's sort of a different twist on
Yeah.
process over outcomes. But what are the things you need to do from an execution and process standpoint to actually get to the outcomes you need? And those are the things that actually you should be worrying about and spending your time on, not the actual outcome. You can't force the outcome, but you can actually do the process. So again, outcomes are the echoes of actions taken.
That's great.
There's another way to
Yeah.
phrase that. And I love that saying because I think
Yeah.
it's the absolute truth. And we all know that's true in every area of our life. We can't dream of being in shape if we don't commit ourselves to working out and getting in shape. We can't dream of losing weight if we don't commit ourselves to the process of cutting back or doing whatever we need to do to lose weight. We can't dream of sales success if we're not committed to the process that's actually going to produce sales
Huh.
success, you know? So these are really simple concepts, but they're
Sure.
easy to get distracted by, quite frankly. And quite frankly, managers often look at outcomes.
The numbers. Yeah.
So that's the part that I think where salespeople say, well, my boss is busting my chops about my performance. And instead of worrying about your performance, worry about your process to improve your
That's very
performance.
wise.
Is another way to think about
Yeah.
it. Right. Then another one here, the last one here is proactive over reactive. And we touched on this a little bit. I think it's easy in sales to be reactive to customers, to sit back and accept what is coming at you. And you're never going to grow your business when you only accept what's coming at you. The only way to actually grow your business is by being proactive in doing those processes and fundamentals with consistency that actually will drive success for yourself. Because I think that in most sales jobs, you can actually have plenty to do all day long by being only reactive.
That's that busy but
And
not productive part, right?
busy but not productive. So having established goals, what are those things that I need to do? I'm a big fan of simplicity. Hey, what are the 3 things I'm going to do today that's going to move the needle? I think if we all just did that, we would, quite frankly, have tremendous success in any job we did. Because we just said, I'm going to do these 3 things. And whatever those might look like for you, I would encourage you to sort of do that. These are the 3 proactive things I'm going to do today to make sure I move the needle, that are going to be part of the process. They're going to produce the outcomes I want, that are based on sound fundamentals, and I'm going to do them consistently.
Yeah. Right. Easier said than
Right?
done, right?
Always easier said than done. And then the whole idea is just to do these same things over and over and over again. Consistency over intensity, fundamentals over fads, process over outcome, being proactive over reactive, over and
Good
over
mantras.
and over again. Like, if you committed to sort of these mantras, I guarantee you'd have success in any endeavor you're committing yourself to. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. But that's sort of the nuts and bolts that I thought would be good for us to cover, Shane, is again, these are more soft skills, I think, in selling. That we didn't get into any specific tactics. I think these are transferable to any kind of sales job,
certainly.
quite frankly. And that's why I sort of built this with my team around these, because I think when we onboard new people, it's getting the mindset, the soft skills really right first, because you can teach people the tactics and the strategy. Anybody can learn that stuff. But if you don't get this stuff down, the soft skills down, the tactics and the strategy are going to be struggling anyways, quite frankly.
Yeah. So I know you're an avid reader, and you're always mentioning these great books that I keep meaning to read myself. But if you're a salesperson wanting to get better at all these things that you're talking about, and just better at the act of being a great salesperson, building relationships and everything, what's your list of go-to books?
I jotted 2 down that I thought would be really helpful for this conversation. One is Atomic Habits by James Clear. It's a fantastic book. I think I've read it probably 5, 6 times. And it's really this whole concept around atomic, really, really small habits or changes can amount to tremendous change. And you're a great example of that, Shane. And that you were not a runner a number of years ago. And you probably couldn't imagine, doing some of the distance runs that you currently do. But because you started small and you added over time, you developed into a runner that can run 20, 30 miles at a shot, which is pretty remarkable. You're a perfect example of this atomic habit philosophy. I've always told my team, hey, let's look to get 1% better every day.
Sounds doable.
We can all get 1% better every day. It's very doable. But if I was to tell them, hey, we're going to get 36.5% better this year, go do that. They would be like, are you kidding me? How am I going to get 36.5% better? But getting 1% better every day is a 36.5% increase in a year of improvement.
I like that.
So James Clear gets really into this in Atomic Habits. There's some incredibly practical things. It's a great, great book.
Yeah, I'll put a link to that in the show notes.
Fantastic. Yeah, because that's one. I think that's one that's influenced a lot of my thinking about sales and building sales success with people, is Atomic Habits. The second one is a book called The Go-Giver. And it really speaks to this model of helping others is how you actually achieve success. And it's counterintuitive to our natural instincts of taking care of ourselves, but we actually gain success through helping others. And we see that. We see that all over the place in real life when someone goes out of their way to do something for us or extends a reference to someone, or, hey, you should connect with this person. I know that they provide a great resource for you in this way. Their help to us enhances our interest in them and our desire to help them further. And I think that's really what we're really trying to get to at sales is be givers of what we're trying to do and help people with. And that's really the model that I think works best in sales. So The Go-Giver is a great book. That's really a parable and an analogy of a person, and it's told through a story, but it's a great one. So that's one that I think aligns with some of the things you talked about that I think the group would really enjoy. So those are two.
I'll put links to those.
Yep.
I promise I will read those.
Awesome. They're worth it. They really are.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Andy, this is so great to put this into a recording for the world to hear, because it's such great wisdom on, it doesn't matter what you're selling. It's just really good, solid, foundational stuff that everyone can use. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing now? Your new career?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so I just recently left my role as a vice president of sales for a big manufacturer to get into sales consulting. I wouldn't. That's the wrong world of consulting. It's actually called a fractional vice president type role. And really all I do is I look for small and medium sized businesses that probably don't have strong sales process, good solid sales infrastructure, maybe a sales platform to help their business, and take my experience and knowledge and wisdom of 30 years of selling and sales leadership. I work with a company called Sales Acceleration and use their proprietary platforms that are really, really good to help companies really develop the right infrastructure and so forth and so on to help their revenue. What happens with a lot of medium and small companies is that maybe it's the owner. They're doing everything. They're running the finances, they are running the operations, and they're probably even running the sales team. And maybe they don't want to be running the sales team, quite frankly. Or maybe they know nothing about sales and their sales team is just, hey, go out and sell stuff. Maybe that's their sales approach. And that's often true with a lot of smaller companies. Quite frankly, as big as a company I came, even our sales processes, quite frankly, weren't great. So now I'm going to spend my time and energy really helping companies flourish and have the growth that they desire through helping them get their sales in the right place through my expertise in the Sales Acceleration platform. I also provide coaching and sales training for sales leaders. Sales training for new salespeople as well are part of this whole platform also. But it takes basically the passion that I have for, I think, number one, building the right cultures, because I think that's where it all starts. And number two, you're helping companies with the structure to a sales process that most people need to just have that success. Again, back to sort of these fundamentals, proactive over reactive, process over outcome, fundamentals over fads, consistency over intensity are sort of good mantras that not a lot of companies have from a sales process standpoint. Yep. So the name of my company is Summit Sales Solutions. It makes a lot of sense, based here in the mountains of Colorado. But would love to help anybody out if they're on a journey for needing some sales improvement.
Yeah, and I'll certainly put a link to your website and everything to be able to get a hold of you. You're going to be phenomenal at your new role, and anybody would be lucky to work with you.
Well, thanks so much, Shane. Appreciate that.
So that wraps up the first chapter of what Andy and I would be talking about. This was very much geared towards sales teams and sales reps out there in the field working with customers. And if sales management and sales leadership is something that you're interested in, make sure you check out the second installment of our discussion in another episode about sales leadership, because it's very, as Andy and I have been talking about, it's a very different set of skills. So we thought it needed a whole different episode. So make sure you check that out, because Andy's exceptional at that topic. So thanks for listening. And thanks to you, Andy. We really appreciate all your wisdom here.
Thank you, Shane. It's a great time. Appreciate it.
We hope you found the information in this episode useful and something you can use in your everyday life as an ed rep. If there is a topic you'd like to learn more about and have presented on a future episode of Ed Rep Radio, or you'd like to give us some feedback in general, please email us at edrepradio@eastmanstrings.com. To learn more about Eastman Music Company, go to our website, eastmanmusiccompany.com, or give your Eastman rep a call. Thanks, and drive safe.